We had this problem at TrendKite where paying our sales team and giving visibility to their incentives and how much were there, it was impossible. We had spreadsheets. We also tried to use a tool that didn't work. It was very finance and didn't do the thing that I needed to do, which was using comp as a performance driver. I was like, this has got to be a better way to do this.
This is Dare to Disrupt, a podcast about Penn State alumni who are innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders, and the stories behind their success. I'm your host, Ryan Newman, and on the show today is AJ Bruno. AJ is the co-founder and CEO of QuotaPath, a leading sales compensation management platform. Under his leadership, QuotaPath has secured significant investments, including a $41 million Series B funding round. QuotaPath serves approximately 1,000 customers, helping organizations align company objectives with incentive compensation plans to drive successful sales behaviors and outcomes. In addition to his role at QuotaPath, AJ co-hosts Topline, a podcast that delves into revenue growth strategies and sales leadership insights. Prior to founding QuotaPath, he founded TrendKite, which Cision acquired for $225 million in 2019. AJ graduated from Penn State with a bachelor's degree in economics from the Smeal College of Business in 2007. Welcome, AJ, to Dare to Disrupt. This is actually a first for us on the show. You're our first guest who's built not one, but two companies that's transformed how we think about business measuring performance. So look forward to getting into all of that and having you join us today.
Ryan, thanks for having me. Actually, and we'll get into this, this is 2.5 for me. I actually did start a company at Penn State. I think it wasn't quite the incorporation, but it got almost there and teased out. Total failure, total cluster, a ton of fun, but it does count as my half. So this is my second for sure, but I get a half in there too.
Love it. 2.5. And I think ultimately you're either winning or you're learning. So we look forward to learning about all of the learning that you've had along the way. But we want to start, AJ, as we normally do, which is at the beginning. Can you share with our listeners some of those early formative years, where you grew up, what those early influences were like, and what it was like just being a kid as AJ?
Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a Yinzer, for sure a Yinzer, through and through. I don't quite have the accent. I've moved around quite a bit, but I grew up in Moon Township, right by the airport. And right by the airport, you may ask, why would I grow up by the airport? Well, my dad was a pilot. My mom was a flight attendant. And so I spent my early years and my early life hanging outside, living in that suburb, riding bikes, playing capture the flag after dark with friends. One of the things that I got into, though, when I was really early was actually acting. My dad, so I mentioned my dad was a pilot, my mom was a flight attendant. And back in the early 90s, US Airways, American Airlines today, had some trouble. Actually, all of the airlines had a lot of issues and challenges. And my dad, flying in the early 90s, was a little bit rocky. There was unfortunately some accidents. One that happened in 1994 that was really close by to us. My dad knew the pilots of that plane.
Wow.
And just really, yeah. So we'll talk about, we take this for granted, right? You have airline safest way to travel. There's 22,000 flights a day, and we've gone decades without really any major incidents in the American travel. So this was something that happened quite some time ago, and it was really rocky. So my dad actually started a side hustle, and that side hustle was he started a video production company. So entrepreneurship and AJ came hand in hand really quickly, and he did all these training films for US Air, but all these local companies. PNC was one of them as well. So he would have all these training videos, and me as a cute strawberry blonde haired kid, it doesn't quite look like it today, but I got to be put in all these like videos and very quickly realized that I loved being in front of a camera. So at that time, 7, 8 years old, what do you do for advertising agency? Well, you hire an agent. Parents hired an agent and really got into theater, Shakespearean theater, Pittsburgh Public Theater. And so throughout my teenage years, I did acting on stage in Pittsburgh, and I've acted with some really awesome people. One of them is Gillian Jacobs. Gillian she's very well known for Community, but also for the show Love on Netflix. I mean, those were really formative years. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs and founders have this something that they tie back to. And maybe they started a business, a lemonade stand or whatever it is. And for me, it was theater. And I started working at a really early age and seeing my dad run a company at that time.
more importantly, running a company out of necessity as opposed to just out of pure passion based on his current circumstances.
Yeah, it's funny. He has a funny story about this because in the 80s, he knew he was going to start with something and he had two choices. His dad, my grandfather, was involved as well. He was giving him the seed money to either start a video production company or a car wash. And years later, he would always say, "Hey, man, I wish I started that car wash." So it was not an easy business for him to start off the bat.
Well, I imagine with a flight attendant and a pilot in the household living so close to the Pittsburgh airport, did you get the bug with respect to flying at all?
Oh, I started flying when I was 15 years old. I actually learned how to fly an airplane before I learned how to drive a car.
Wow.
So I got the bug. I soloed an airplane at 15 and a half. And we'll get to this. I don't want to fast forward, but I also don't want to bury the lead. I started my first company, not the half company, the first company to buy an airplane. And so today I'm a commercially rated pilot. I have an airplane at Wings Field in Bluebell in Norristown outside Philadelphia. And right after this, no joke, I am taking my daughter first to basketball practice, but then she's really interested in learning how to fly. So we're going to go do some ground work with her in the cockpit of the airplane. And she's 10 years old. So I'm really excited
10.
to do that. Yeah.
Amazing. And by the way, you mentioned commercially rated. That's not a common designation for a private pilot.
It is not. It is something that I wanted to do. I don't do it as my day job. I'm not out there flying for Southwest today, but I've always wanted to get that commercial license. So I have my private license, my instrument rating, and then my commercial license. And that was over 5 years, maybe time period, 2 different airplanes, 2 different startups, and 3 different kids. So there's a lot going on in that 2012 to 2018 world where we also moved 3.5 times too.
Wow. Incredible. So AJ, you have this amazing experience, early exposure to business, as well as acting, as well as flying. What was it that caused you to go to Penn State? Well, ultimately, what was that decision process like? And what was it like when you first got on campus?
In 2001, my dad had actually just sold his business and the airlines were a little bit more stable. They were flying international. And so the major hub at that time was Philadelphia. And my dad's from Philadelphia. So we moved when I was 15 to Philly and I kind of stopped acting altogether. I was a little rebellious. I was like, I could have gone pro, but just got to hang it up right now. So I never made it out to LA. Of course, Gillian did and some friends that I knew did. Outside Philadelphia, Chester County, I got more into cross country. But one of the things that I just absolutely loved and grew up around was Penn State football. And it's kind of funny because I have an interesting tie-in to Notre Dame as well. One of my uncles went to Notre Dame. My mom met Lou Holtz on a flight as a flight attendant. She met lots of people over the years.
Sure.
And he wrote me this really awesome note that and it said from the desk of Lou Holtz with the gold helmet on it. And at the end he said, "I hope you come to Notre Dame and have the luck of the Irish."
Wow.
Well, that did not happen. In fact, I was just at the Orange Bowl in Miami to watch our beloved state lose to Notre Dame. But I always had this tie to Penn State. I actually had never been to State College until I arrived on campus freshman year.
Wow.
Well, I took the tour. Of course, I like that. I did the tour of the campus. But I never really spent any time in State College. So I didn't really have a family tie. My dad went to Villanova. So I applied Villanova, Penn State. I had a full ride to Iona. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do post-college, but I knew I wanted to have a great campus experience. And out of all the schools that I applied to, Penn State had by far the best campus experience. And that was just everything student life. Getting into Maine my freshman year, I had to go do LEAP, the summer session, which turned out to be such a blessing because at the time I was like, I lose my after senior year of high school summer and I got to go to school already. You got to be kidding me. But I went and my roommate at that time ended up being my college roommate for 4 years. And he was the president of the squash club and he ended up being my best friend. And we're still really, really close today. So it was really very fortuitous. So shout out to Adam Finn out there, but I had a great summer. And then I got placed in North Halls. North at the time was tucked in the very quiet area of State College. Smeal was just getting built. That whole area it was just farmland. 2003. So not very good in football, but everything else was just awesome. And I started to lean more into business. also thinking MSIS, which really became computer science, the early days of computer science, or at least there was a business tied to MSIS, it was where I was headed towards, but stayed general and more liberal arts until my junior year before like really jumping into SMEAL.
You're in the university, you're sort of figuring out where your focus is. How did you select a major? You talked about SMEAL, talked about liberal arts. How did you ultimately decide on a major, and what was your course of study, and what were some of the things you were interested in when you were on campus?
I was a little bit of a lost puppy, so to speak, in that there was so much to do and it was so overwhelming my first couple of years that I like kind of just was taking it all in. A couple of things that did stick out to me. One, I knew I wanted to like learn Italian. That was like number one. So I actually ended up studying in Italy twice through Penn State. Once was a full summer. It was like an 8-week art history program. Like, art history? Were you into art history? Well, no, I actually wasn't at the time. I was just into Italian. And this was a program where you could go and live with a family that didn't speak any English. And so I lived on an Italian chicken farm in Todi,
Whoa,
in Umbria. Yeah, it was really cool. Like, one of my jobs was to wake up pretty early and go make sure that all the 60,000 chickens were alive and well. And so I would just like comb that, go learn Italian. And then on the weekends, we would go to 30 different, I mean, this was over 6 weeks. We went to like 30 different towns and cities, and it was just awesome. That was such a great experience. So I did have a tie there. As I mentioned, my roommate was the president of the squash club, and squash was all done out of Rec Hall. They have since built squash courts at Penn State. I think it was racquetball courts that were repurposed for squash at that time. And so I got to like make really good friends. I wasn't very good at squash, but I could play and hang out with them. And then it was all things extracurricular on campus, of course, football. And I was a part of the very first Paternoville that ever existed and camped out at that time.
So you were having these amazing experiences. You know, Steve Jobs famously said, only in hindsight did the dots connect. So you'll have to let us know how looking after chickens in Italy ultimately planted a seed for you and where you are today. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about your first entrepreneurial instinct. This would be, you talked about 2.5 being on company number 2.5. So maybe we can talk about company half that kind of never made it out of the starting gates at Penn State. If you want to share some of the story on that.
So this was my senior year, and I lived above Spats my senior year. I had the absolute best apartment my senior year. The only reason I did, because one of my other friends that was also on the squash team, he was also club lacrosse, and this was a lacrosse house. But my room had it looked out into Old Main, and you could go out of the window, and it had like this little deck. So like homecoming parade was just packed, right? And so I had 5 roommates that played lacrosse, and I was the only one that didn't play lacrosse. And one of those roommates was very entrepreneurial, and he had started a little side project where he was delivering groceries. And so he was getting more and more into this, and then they were going to roll this out into its own thing. At the same time, I was listening to, I don't know, the radio, because podcasts weren't really a thing. This guy had started this website called $1 Million Homepage. And the idea was that you could purchase a pixel on a screen for $1, and there are 1 million pixels on a screen. And so advertisers could purchase it. He would have it up for 10, 20, 30 years. In a week, he sold out all the pixels and made $1 million. And I was like, well, if it's that easy to do this, I can start this. By the way, that same founder was the founder of Calm.com. So he went on and did some interesting things post this $1 million homepage. So I was like, oh, what if there was a website that was just a blank website? Now, remember, this is before Twitter, and really Facebook was just kind of a thing. It was launched, I think, 2005, 2006 at Penn State, and we had just gotten on Facebook. But it was just a blank page, and there was a text box. And in that text box, you could type anything you want. And then I hit enter, and that would show up on that box. And then the next person that could change it would control the buzz. And so you could change it to whatever you are. So that started controlthebuzz.com. And so I started this website, and I was like, well, I need to monetize this. I was like, well, what if you could just pay $1 and you could just change it for $1? And my roommate was like, okay, this is a great idea. I have a payment processing that we did through PNC, and like we could go do that, because this was before Stripe or anything you could do developer wise for payment processing. So we had to like hack this together. And then I found another developer, and I was like, well, I want this to be gamified. So at 10 control the buzzes, it freezes for 10 minutes. At 1,000 minutes, and so on and so forth. And it would have like this little animation and jump. And we built it and we did it. And to market it, I dressed up in Shakespearean garb because I had my throwback to my acting days. And I ran around between classes and I would have this Shakespearean monologue. And then I threw all of these pamphlets up in the air and someone would come and like look at them. My goal was to get written about in the Daily Collegian, which didn't happen, but that's okay. I would just remember the Willard preacher just like looking at me and being like, what are you doing, you crazy person? And it took a lot for him to be like, what is going on in front of the Willard building right now? And then I ran and did that a couple times. And ultimately we made $72. And then I went to Milan and studied my second semester in Italy. And so it got cut off. So that's why there's the story of the half.
Love it. And ultimately, when you reached graduation, what did you decide to do?
I graduated in econ. I had an internship the year before with NFL Films, which I think was just a really cool experience for me, but I really didn't want to do that. And so I had a couple family friends that were fairly successful in business and starting their own companies. I knew I eventually wanted to start my own company. I knew it wasn't going to be right away. Hadn't really had anything outside of that half experience that hit me, but I knew I needed to learn a lot more in the corporate world. And so a family friend said, well, why don't you go into sales? Like sales? I didn't take a single class on sales. So I actually looked at locally because I moved back to Philadelphia and I found this company that was fairly entrepreneurial called Meltwater. And it was the only interview I did. And I got hired and I took it, not having a clue what I was about to get myself into in the sales world. But it definitely was the right move. And I spent 5.5 years and 3 different cities and 4 different roles at Meltwater. And so that was my launching point for my career.
And AJ, can you said that you always knew that you were going to start a company. Can you talk about where that initial, obviously we talked about the experience of watching your dad and being entrepreneurial when you were young, but if you had to kind of pinpoint it, what was it that caused you to have this burning awareness that you would always start a company? And what was it that allowed you to have that early premonition persist through a lot of other experiences where you're doing things that at times were entrepreneurial, like for example, your senior year, but also other times where you weren't? If you could kind of really pinpoint it and sort of describe the psychology and makeup, which caused you to know that that was going to be your destiny.
I think I'll also answer that by saying, how did I not know as well? Because hindsight's 2020. So we look back at it, it's like, oh, all roads were leading to this, but I wasn't a super focused person. I mean, I did okay in school. I think I had a 3.3 GPA by the end. It was definitely not that at the beginning. I think I was like after sophomore year in the 2.8 realm. My parents were ticked and were like, what are you doing up there? You're just like partying, watching football and hanging out. I'm like, and trying to learn Italian. I'm like, well, just trying to figure it out. And so a lot of that was happening in the background and I wasn't really focused. And so I didn't really actually know that to be the case. It looks like that was always the case, but I was just doing things that I was interested in. I wanted to generate wealth. I think that was a big part of it, but I didn't really know why. And so I will jump ahead for a second because what really ultimately was the catalyst was going to a Tony Robbins conference and Unleash the Power Within. That really helped me think about what Tony had described as limiting beliefs of what are stopping you or holding you back from achieving some of these things, money, education, confidence in my case, and really being able to say those are all the things that are just noise and actually going and being focused. So I had a lot of the tools, Ryan, to really actually do the thing, but I didn't know I really wanted to do the thing until I sat down and said, what do I actually want from a goal? If I want financial freedom, well, how do I get that? If I want to buy an airplane, how do I do that? If I want to be my own boss, how do I actually do that? What does it take? I always had the work ethic. That was never in question. I always had the salesmanship. That was never in question. But it was, what can I do with these things? And how can I turn these strengths and passions really into something that was creating ROI for a large group of stakeholders? And so that really working backwards from that is what helped it. Because otherwise, before that, I was really just floating along. It wasn't until 2011 when my boss at Meltwater dragged me to one of these conferences. I'm like, oh, walk on coals. Are you serious? Okay, whatever. I'll try that out. And then I just absolutely loved it. To this day, it's actually it's outside, but I have a little book that I take with me everywhere. It has all of my goals that I just constantly write down and think about. And so getting really, really laser focused on what I wanted to do and achieve, and then writing them down is what ultimately has helped me make me a great entrepreneur and founder, operator, and executive at my own business.
I heard someone say before once that life's about three things: the books you read, the people you meet, and the goals you set and achieve. And you clearly honed in on the goal piece. But I want to go back to this student who's a 2.8 sort of floating through. We're talking to you now as a highly successful serial entrepreneur with a very serious podcast, all of which we're going to get to. What advice or suggestions do you have for both the student that's floating through as well as the parent that's trying to get their student to kind of see the light that you ultimately saw?
Patience, patience, patience. I think that was the thing that my parents probably practiced, because they had given me the world and all these things. They took me to the theater in Pittsburgh, 30 minutes away every night, and they really pushed me in lots of different directions. I think one of the biggest regrets I have, Ryan, in my life is that I didn't get my Eagle Scout. I was literally just the Eagle Project away. I had all my merit badges. I had everything except my Eagle Project. And not only that, like I had done all the planning to it. And the reason for that is my mom had pushed me so hard on it that I just was like, nope, I'm rebelling on this. I'm not doing it. I'm done. So I think the thing I would tell all parents is that your son or your daughter, they have it in them. Just let them come to you. They have to be the driver to that. Now, what do I wish I had told myself? Actually, the thing you just said is really, really interesting. The books you read, the people you meet, and the goals that you set. And those are all very true. I listen to a ton of podcasts myself and content and consume. And my favorite podcast is the podcast called The Acquired, which is just all about history. I would actually 3 weeks ago went to Radio City Music Hall, where the podcast host, they actually had Jamie Dimon on as a guest. And just the hour and a half that they spent with him was just amazing. So you learn so much from this, and history repeats itself. So that's the thing that I would push anyone out there, is just to consume as much around the world as you possibly can. I should have done that more. My time at campus was the best time in my life. Those are the best 4 years I've in my entire, and everyone says this. You have like no responsibilities. You're just hanging out with friends. You don't have no money. So you're like, but you don't care. You're doing just really great things. And Penn State is this bubble that is awesome. And you just don't realize it until you're gone. So honestly, Ryan, my advice is just enjoy your time. It's okay. Life will eventually catch up to you, and that's fine too.
So you're at Meltwater. You get taken to this Tony Robbins event, break through your limiting beliefs, write down your goals, and ultimately you come out of Meltwater, presumably with a head of steam. Is that the moment that you launched, or did that lead to the moment of launch? And if so, where do you go from there?
Well, so Meltwater, I had moved from Philadelphia. I was the director of the Philly office at the ripe old age of 22 years old.
Wow.
I just got married. I then moved to California, San Diego, and my wife and I were in San Diego. She worked for a earthquake construction firm, which was fascinating. In 2012, I had two things that had happened. One I've already talked about, which was I went to Tony Robbins, and that focused me. But the other was a boss that I could not stand working with. It was a massive challenge working with this person. All of the things that you read about terrible bosses, unfortunately, I experienced. And that was definitely a catalyst. He wrote me an email once, right after Tony Robbins, when I had already said, I'm going to go do this. Said, AJ, if you were running a business, this business would go bankrupt and you'd be losing millions of dollars a year.
Wow.
And I sat on that, and I was like, I had so many emotions going through my head at that. And just like the emotional weight of like being a failure was something I just didn't really process or think about. And to be like, our office was doing well, but not well comparatively. It was struggling in some ways. And so that was something that was just a hard truth. And I looked at that email and I said, you know what? He's right. I shouldn't be here, but I shouldn't be working for you, but I actually should be running a business. I think I'm going to go the contrarian and put a chip on my shoulder on this. And I actually started a business that was directly competitive with Meltwater because of that. And we took $40 million of business from them over 4.5 years. That manager got fired, ended up working for Salesforce of all places. But I never forgot that. That lesson learned was great. And I just lived and breathed all things entrepreneurship. So in San Diego, I had someone that I worked with previously who also coincidentally moved out there, and he had started a couple companies at Penn State and went through the entrepreneurial program and similar background, but got to sales the similar way, which someone told him like, well, go get a sales background because you got to learn how to generate revenue. And he was winding down that business. So we were talking, we're like, let's just go start something together. And we went to go join an accelerator because that's what you did. It was just like two guys. What are you going to do? Well, we don't know anything about startups, so let's go join an accelerator. So we applied to YC, and we applied to Techstars, and we applied to Dream It Ventures. We got denied by YC, and this was in 2011, 12. So Paul Graham was still writing emails direct to founders. And so PG just wrote, you don't have a co-founder. Sorry, pass. Like that was the email.
Wow.
The whole email that I have.
Wow.
Yeah. We then got into Techstars and got into Dream It, but Techstars didn't have the right cycle for us. Also Alpha Labs out of Pittsburgh we got into too. But so we only had one choice, which was Dream It. And I had just seen the demo day at Philadelphia in December of that year, December 2012. So we were going to go and join the inaugural Dream It Ventures cycle in Austin, Texas. And Steve Welch, who is the founder of Dream It, he's also founded a lot of companies. He's also the founder of Restore Cryotherapy. I just went deep sea fishing with him. He's a really good friend. But I sat down in the interview. Steve's a Penn State grad. And Steve looked at me and he goes, AJ, I don't believe in media. I don't believe in PR. I do not believe in anything that you're doing right now at all. He was like, if it was up to me, we would not accept you to Dream It Ventures. But it's not just up to me. It's up to Carrie Rupp and Mike Levinson sitting to my left and right, and David Bookspan. And they all think you guys have something. So we're going to accept you into the program. We went running. And it's kind of funny because like Dream It, then the fund invested, I think, 250 to 500K. And we like 5x their money off of it. And to this day, Steve's like, I still don't believe in media or communication. So like, okay, I don't know what you want from me, Steve. But so we went through Dream It Ventures. That was 3 months in Austin. Didn't have any money. So we were living out of a home away. We had just moved from San Diego. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our first.
Wow.
Our daughter was born during the Dream It cycle. So she's born February 5th. TrendKite incorporated March 5th. Of 2013. So within a month of each other. I got home that morning. Our daughter was born that night. I spent 5 days in Philly with my newborn, my first, and my wife. And then I don't know how she's still married to me because I flew back to Austin for demo day for the next month. And so I spent a month and a half away from my daughter during that time. It's the things you do in startup world. We got funded. The Silverton partners said, well, look, went to first round and Josh Koppelman and went all the way to the partner meeting in San Francisco. And they were like, yeah, we don't really believe in PR or media. Sorry, we're not investing in this, which is just kind of like the thing. It was this sleepy industry. So Silverton said, yeah, we'll invest, but you have to move the company to Austin. We're like, okay, I guess we're moving the company to Austin. So I told my wife, like, oh, look, we'll be in Austin for 2 years. These startups, they don't go very, like, they're just hot and fast and they're 2 years. 5 years later, she was like, AJ, we got to move back to Philadelphia. So that was a fast forward, but it was a crazy 5 years. So we went from zero to almost $40 million in revenue. I ran all of inside sales, founder and president, and did all of the things and learned all of the things and built a team. But it was a ton of fun. Worked with Nike and Hershey and Google and Meta and Snapchat and like just all of these amazing companies that we got to go and like visit on site. It was a great experience. And we sold to Cision PR Newswire in 2018 for $225 million. And I had already started my second company by that point. So I was already back on the road with QuotaPath.
Amazing. So you had this incredible business. You were able to raise venture capital on the way in. You then ultimately scaled and led that company to an incredibly successful outcome. You've achieved the entrepreneurial brass ring of not only founding a business, but developing and building the business, raising outside capital, and then selling the business. And then you do the most amazing, interesting thing right after you sell this business, which is you start another one. What's going on, AJ? What are we thinking?
Thinking for the business, or what was I thinking starting another one? Because I think it was just crazy. I really quickly, I was running, I had like just the entire sales team, which was like 40 people at TrendKite over to my house when we were kind of like growing. And I had this like special marinade with steaks, and my wife had to help me with all of this would take like 5 hours, and we're prepping it. And she's in the kitchen, and she's like, we're all stressed out because the party's in like 3 hours and not anywhere near close to getting done. And one of the like containers with the steak marinade falls on the ground.
Oh,
And she just looks at me dead serious. She goes, AJ, if you start another company, I will divorce you.
oh boy. Oh boy.
Don't worry. I'm like, yeah.
And for the record, you're still happily married.
I'm still very happily married.
So you must be an amazing negotiator. Maybe
like
that's what we need to be talking about.
I've negotiated my way through a lot of different things over the years. And so, what was I thinking? Well, we had this problem at TrendKite where paying our sales team and giving visibility to their incentives and how much it was impossible. We had spreadsheets. We also tried to use a tool that didn't work. It was very finance and didn't do the thing that I needed to do, which was using comp as a performance driver. I was like, this has got to be a better way to do this. So that was like what usually leads to aha moments. You deal with the problem yourself. I knew I could raise money, and that wasn't a problem. Started in Philadelphia, but my co-founder was in Austin. I had a huge network in Austin as well. Today, we're about 70 people. We have grown considerably. The last 3 years has been at least 50 to 60% growth year over year. It's been a lot of fun. It hasn't been without its challenges. Software is very, very difficult right now, but it's also the absolute best time to be in technology. And I say that no BS, where like, even 6 months ago, I was like, oh my goodness, no one should be starting a company. But today I'm like, no, everybody should be starting a company. So I've reversed course. I'm very hot. I'm very polarizing, as you can tell. I have like spectrum. I'm either very hot or very cold. But I think it's just an awesome opportunity, what we have with AI. And it's just so much fun to be in it. I have a great team. The average tenure at QuotaPath is 3.5 years, 4 years. I've raised with HubSpot Ventures, Carta Ventures, Insight Partners out of New York, a $90 billion fund. I have a great board, great team, a great company, and we're working on something really, really challenging and mission critical, and something that I don't think is going to be fully disrupted by AI because it's payroll, and payroll needs to be accurate. So you can't hallucinate it, and you need to be 100% on. So one part there, but then the strategy aspect allows us to take AI and think about this in a very different way, where we're helping our customers at the mid-market specifically really think through their comp and how do you actually align company objectives to incentives. Show me an incentive and I'll show you an outcome. That is a famous quote by Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner in crime for decades, recently passed away. But that's something he's always said, and I believe it to be true. If you really want your team to act on something, incentivize them and they'll do the thing. And we see that over and over again with our customers, and of course with QuotaPath too.
Well, another Charlie Munger quote is to start with the end in mind. And so if you think of the end and work backwards, or when in doubt, always invert, where do you see QuotaPath going in relation to TrendKite? And is it a different outcome? Is it the same outcome? How do you think through that?
I think it's different by virtue of how we built it in our business model. At TrendKite, we had a very B2B inside sales team. It was a high performing team. For QuotaPath, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I thought about brand and distribution, most importantly. So we invested very heavily in brand. We have a great brand today, but with distribution, partnerships and ecosystems, we're going to play a really important part, because we sit as like middleware between CRM and payroll. We're this connective tissue, and we enrich ERP or accounting data that comes across Stripe data, credit card, whatever it is, to help then give the comp engine basically the earnings rules, sit on top of that, and then spit out like the right accurate commissions that a seller should earn. And so the outcome here, Ryan, is different in the sense that I think we can play a really interesting part in this like ecosystem and supercharge one of our strategics long-term. Different ways to do that. Data, I think we will ultimately, as a strategic lever, sit at the office of the CEO someday. And I think that's something that's really interesting as well. Everyone talks about their life's work, and we talk about this in my own podcast. I just love learning and growing. I think that there's just so much interesting things to be done that I'm not really 100% focused on quote unquote an outcome. I'm certainly working backwards. I think about all of the different pieces that we're doing and how do I work backwards from there. But I am not sitting here saying like, oh, we're going to exit in 2 years for 450 million because of these 5 things. And we're going to go hire this investment bank. Like, I'm not doing that. And I don't think we should be doing that. We should just be building a product that has real value, solves a real problem in the jobs to be done framework for our customers.
You mentioned something earlier about AI. You said, about the idea that AI won't fully disrupt the payroll, the work that QuotaPath's doing because of the fact that it's tied to payroll and specifically the limiting nature of hallucinations. I mean, in reality, AI with hallucinations can't really be relied upon for much of anything. And so the question I have for you is, how do you view the role of hallucinations in the AI learning language models? How do you think that evolves over time? And ultimately, if we get to a point where the hallucination factor does get diminished, does that then therefore lead for AI to be able to be disruptive to a space like you're in?
Hold on, Ryan. Let me put on my Meta AI glasses to help answer this question.
Am I speaking to AJ or an avatar?
I do actually like these glasses. People were like, I got them as a gift for a CEO offsite that I was going to, and I live streamed my daughter's basketball game the other week, which was awesome. I used Notebook LM to take a deep research memo and turn it into a podcast that I then listened to on these glasses and recorded on these glasses, and then had a conversation with Meta AI after. The fact is the nerdiest, dorkiest thing ever to do. First and foremost, let me I don't want to say revise, but clarify my comment on disruption. AI is disrupting everything. So if it doesn't disrupt, quote unquote, the payroll part of it, well, you could definitely make a case that's going to disrupt the sales headcount part of it. And so what does that do to a business model? I don't know. So I'm not going to sit here and paint this rosy picture on everything, because there's definitely some research out there that suggests that, in fact, this was Claude CEO saying unemployment could be 20% in a few years. That feels a little alarmist. I think we're going to adapt and figure out what works and what doesn't that's best in our own economy, and GDP, I think, is something that we as a country and how we export services to the level that we do find really important. So I think we're going to figure that out. But what I will say in terms of hallucinations, to answer your question, is that the model is going to get better. Hallucinations will get more and more accurate. I think that the challenge with the deterministic versus non-deterministic is that computers are binary. They're literally binary. They're ones and zeros. And so we're programming AI on top of a binary construct. It's actually very problematic and challenging to do. And there's people that are 100 times smarter than me that have been working on this for decades. My long-term vision of this is very bullish on the productivity and how software companies are able to get the most out of AI in much more of a co-pilot type of way. And it starts with the CEO and the leader. So if you're a CEO or you're a leader or you're a founder out there and you're not playing with all of the latest and greatest in AI, what are you doing? Because that's where you need to understand this intimately better than anyone. I have 3 hours booked on Friday with my chief product officer to do 3 hours of vibe coding in Cursor with him. So that's something that I know is going to be so important. And yeah, it's not going to be production ready code at the end of it, but it will definitely take I'm such a visual learner. So what I think about in visual and pull it out. It's just, to me, it's another evolution of Figma, which I love Figma. I'm in Figma every week, which is just an interesting comment to make, where a CEO is in a design program every week. Yep, you betcha. I sure am.
And so when you think about the role of AI with respect to QuotaPath and how you're sort of planning for that, not knowing where the future ultimately resides, what do you think is most appropriate steps you're taking to try to make sure you're positioned for success? And more importantly, when you step outside of QuotaPath, what are the steps you think other entrepreneurs need to be taking to make sure this is something that they capture as a benefit as opposed to a cost to their ultimate outcome?
So first and foremost, at the beginning of the year, I centralized AI, and my director of revenue ops, who had been doing a bunch of stuff with AI anyway, and made him AI ops. So I think if you're a founder, you should be thinking about your operations as your backbone. And, a QuotaPath and incentives are a small piece of that. We're working on this really cool AI project where you can create a quote called CPQ quote inside HubSpot and then ask the AI, how much would I make if I made this a 2-year deal versus a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal? And so you as a founder are everyone's building AI first products, but what you also need to be doing is AI ops and making sure you're setting up your company for success long term. And like, what are all the connections between your CRM and between your other systems of work that you're doing, all of the tools that you have? How do they integrate, connect, and then ultimately inform what you need to be doing? Because AI can take that, but it's hard without context. So setting those things up so that AI can sit on top of that in the right way. The world is shifting where you have to have an umbrella of something that sits over top of all of those, not just the knowledge base. Like here in Philadelphia, there's Guru. That's easy to pull the AI out of, but data is a lot harder. And so we think about it in terms of like, how do we refactor some of these pieces that we built years ago to help build this for the future in this AI world?
Now, in addition to these 2.5 companies you've built as a serial entrepreneur, you also have a side hustle, if you will, which is the form of a podcast. Can you talk about the podcast? Give us some insights into that.
Yeah, I mean, so Topline is with really good friends. My co-host, Austin Zaman, who's the CEO of Sales Talent Agency, the top executive recruiting company in North America. They're absolutely crushing it. And then Sam Jacobs, who's the CEO of Pavilion, community of about 20,000 B2B professionals. It was started as a passion project, like these things do, where in March of 2023, I was in Park City skiing with friends with all my Penn State grads. Just as a total side note, like my closest friends are all my college friends and all wildly successful. So we were there in March of 2023, and at Thursday morning, I was about to go to Deer Valley. I got a text from my CFO at 6 a.m. Have you seen the news? I'm like, oh, what are you talking about, Ryan? And I'm like, no. And he sends me a tweet. SVB is going under. Get your money out now. Silicon Valley Bank. And I was like, what the hell? I was freaking out a little bit. So funny enough, SVB was literally running a conference at the Four Seasons right next door. I wasn't staying at the Four Seasons. So I walked up and I just like knocked on the door. I'm like, hi, I have $50 million in your bank. Can you please do something about this? Like, what? I mean, I'm being a little tongue in cheek, but it was kind of like, that was the conversation. Like, well, what is going on, guys? What am I supposed to do? And they're like, they like shut the door. They're like, can't talk about it. Long story short, everyone was made whole that had money with the bank. Like the investors weren't made whole, as they shouldn't be. They're speculative investors. But if you had money at the bank, yes, the FDIC was going to back $250K, but they ultimately did back the 50 million, and all the money ended up being there anyway at the end of the day. Sam Jacobs, my co-host now, calls me. He's like, hey, I'm going to do this webinar for just Pavilion members. Would you want to join? And I'm also going to get Asid to join. You have money at SVB. I also bank at SVB. Like, let's just like talk about it. So we had honestly 500 people show up to this thing, and we're like, what is going on? People are going to care about it. And at the end, it was an hour. It was scheduled to be 45 minutes. It went for like 3 hours because there were so many questions, and we were just having great community conversation. At the end of it, I texted Asid. I was like, Asid, we have such great chemistry. The three of us need to do something together. Like, we have to do something together. And so we started to do this on a weekly basis. And for the last 2.5 years, we've done it every week. We're on episode 122. And you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, of course, and on YouTube. I love it. I learned so much. It's so well researched. And I just absolutely love going in and having the operator point of view. We're all running companies today. And that is what people want to hear about. Every week, there's just some drama. Deal infiltrated Rippling, and now there's a massive lawsuit, and they honeypotted. Like, there's just really interesting stuff that happens in tech that you don't get elsewhere that are like really big deals.
Amazing. Well, really appreciate the time we spent together, AJ. I'm now going to go into a rapid fire segment of our show. This is a new segment, so who better to start it with than a professional podcaster like yourself? I'll ask you a few questions. You tell me the first thing that comes to mind in a sentence or less. This is tough. Make sense?
Okay.
What is your favorite food?
My favorite food is Yorkshire pudding.
What is the first thing you do in the morning?
I get up and stretch.
What is your go-to productivity tool or app?
My current go-to productivity app is Cluely.
What is your favorite thing about Penn State?
My favorite thing about Penn State is the campus. It is the best campus I've ever been to.
What is the best advice you've received in a sentence or less?
The best advice I've ever received is to take a pause when something gets emotionally heated.
What is your superpower as a founder?
Oh, my superpower is my passion. I love everything I do, and I think people notice that.
What is your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
My favorite way to unwind after a long day is to watch an episode of Friends.
If you weren't building startups, what would you be doing?
If I wasn't building a startup, I'd be flying airplanes all day long.
And last question, we have to ask it. What does disruption mean to you?
Disruption means a technology event that absolutely changes the way every single human being lives on a day-to-day basis.
Wow. Thank you, AJ, for taking the time to share your entrepreneurial journey with me. I'll now hand things over to a recent Penn State student, Paul Allen. Paul graduated from the Penn State College of Engineering this past spring with a degree in electrical engineering. He is a current participant in the Invent Penn State Summer Founders Program, which provides a $15,000 equity-free grant to startups with at least one Penn State student founder, enabling them to work on their startup, social good, or nonprofit idea over the summer. Paul's startup, Reflex Technologies, is building a wearable EMG sensor that provides real-time muscle activation and fatigue insights to athletes and trainers. Paul, I'll now hand the interview over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you for having me on the show and for the connection to AJ. AJ, a quick question I have for you. So being a solo founder myself right now, I'm constantly having to switch hats as to what I'm doing. So how do you kind of prioritize your time when there's pressure to build the product, also talk to users, and grow your marketing awareness all at once?
Oh, I absolutely love that question, Paul. And first off, kudos to you for being a solo founder. I never had the guts to be able to do that. I was always like, oh, I should just do this myself. No, I need co-founders.
Sure.
So one of the things that Tony Robbins actually taught, he talks about this idea of RPM, rapid planning method. And I do some level of that, but it is, you basically write down all of the things. I write it down on a weekly basis. Like, what are all the things that I need to go out and achieve? And I'll do two things with that. One, I'll circle the ones that connect to each other. And the other thing is I'll cross off just like 90% of the list and just know that I'm not going to be able to achieve those things. So then I take those things on a daily basis and I basically break them up. I chunk them into what are the activities that are going to help me achieve that goal. So like I'm just working backwards, but I do this on a long term. I do this on a 3-year plan. I do this on a yearly. I do this on a monthly. I do it on a weekly, and then I break it down into a daily as well.
Sure. And now, obviously, I know you are part of a 70-person team right now, but how has AI shifted the way in which you kind of make these decisions on focusing your time here and there? Can you walk me through, like, what are you using AI for in your day-to-day processes?
It hasn't really changed my day-to-day in terms of the thing that I'm doing, but it has changed in terms of my productivity or efficiency. So I'll listen to podcasts when I run. And if I record it at the end, I might actually like stop and have a conversation with ChatGPT. I switch large language models all the time. Sometimes I'm on Claude, sometimes on GPT, Perplexity. I've become much more of a writer than I ever was previously. And that's clarifying my thoughts. And so writing memos, but using AI as a sounding board to be able to make sure that I'm doing what I said, which was, what's the best advice I've ever gotten? Taking a pause. So if I get an email or a Slack or text or whatever that has an emotionally charged piece of it, I don't answer it right then. I'll take a step back. A lot of times I'll just talk to GPT and just say, I'll clarify my thoughts. What I try not to do, and I really try hard not to do this, is to dilute down my voice by using AI, like this idea of bot breath, so to speak. I don't like that. So if I'm writing an email and I'm using Fixer, for example, it drafts an example of my email in my own words. I have a prompt that is like specific to me. It's gotten really good. Like I can look at an email and be like, oh, I only need to fix like some of this. Or there'll be emails where I'm like, nope, start over from scratch. I'm going to start over again. So that's a different way of use case of how I use AI as well.
Yeah. And now speaking again on this team, being a solo founder and eventually going to need to bring on multiple people to take up some of my responsibilities, kind of how do you make that decision of what are the first roles you need to bring on? Also, what are some key traits and features that you're looking for in those early hires?
Yeah, Paul, I'm going to tell you a secret, and everyone out there, and this is learning over like 15 years. There are 2 hires that I will like not live without. One is a phenomenal head of product. Now you're the head of product, right? But a thought partner to you that like actually knows product process and operations is worth their weight in gold. And I mentioned this before earlier in the conversation with Ryan, ops and operation, someone that's operation minded. Now, every founder is different. They're going to have their strengths and weaknesses. Mine is sales. Like I go to market, I can do that in my sleep. But I know my weaknesses, and my weaknesses are a spreadsheet. And so I will hire someone that truly can take anything, knows SQL, knows the business super well, and is just the thought partner. So I can call him at the end of the day. Someone that you are very engaged with, that you have no issue. If you're not hiring a co-founder, then you need someone that you're like in it with you and in the trenches as well. Those are the 2 hires to make.
Gotcha.
Are you going to make those 2 hires?
Oh, well, we'll see. We don't have the funds right now to make any hires. But yeah, I mean, that's where my passion comes into it, right? Like I'd be doing this for free. So if I could find more people like that, but those are few and far between. So my next question kind of goes to, now that you're building a product, ours being quite a technical product in the sense that it's both hardware and software. For us, it's specifically to a consumer facing audience. Kind of how do you balance this pressure between shipping things quickly, but also risking losing trust in your customers?
Ooh, well, first off, hardware and software, I always am so jealous of anyone that can go do that, because it is a very hard road, as you know. I think the shipping and getting things out quickly versus ensuring you have the right quality checks is just something that it's so intuitive, like intuition comes up. So for companies that are greenfield, like there's no one out there and you got to race as fast as you can, just get it out there and just ship it. That works. For areas where you're disrupting, like let's say an industry like payroll, and you need to be much more methodical and quality matters, then you do have to pull back and make sure there's pieces of it. That's not to say that you won't get an MVP out there to actually test with the market and do all the lean canvas model. The goal being you definitely need to talk to customers as much as you possible. Whether shipping or not, make sure you're talking to 5 to 10 customers a week in those early stages. Like that's the advice that I can give. I still talk to 5 to 10 customers, not a week as much anymore, but during a quarter, I will 100% talk to our customers.
Yeah, I think that's some of the best advice I've gotten this summer doing the Summer Founders Program, was to just talk to customers as much as possible. And so, I kind of want to take a quick change of topics here. So now that we say we found product market fit, what is the kind of decision process going through your head when you're trying to think about scaling a venture, whether it's through raising capital or trying to bootstrap? And when do you kind of know whether or not one of those might be right for you?
First off, you can always fall out of product market fit. So the one thing that I'll caution all the listeners out there is that product market fit is evolving, and it's something that you always need to keep your eye on the ball. So I'll go back to step 1, talk to customers. But as far as like venture funding or not, at the end of the day, I wish like every founder wishes they could bootstrap their company. Sometimes it's just not possible. Sometimes it takes a lot of capital. It's capital intensive. Hardware is a capital intensive world. And I don't want to speak for you, Paul, but I think you're going to have to raise if you keep going. I think that's going to have to happen. So it's really just the position that you're in. I know a lot of service tech enabled founders that have spun off their own products and used their service revenue to fund their product. That's tough because that gives you 2 different like worlds that you're living in. You can't operate 2 different business models. So that makes it a little bit more challenging, especially with the employee base. I am probably not the best person to honestly ask for that, because I've always raised money. I raised $45 million at TrendKite. I've raised $70 million at QuotaPath. I just don't know a different world. And I am envious of founders that are able to bootstrap. And like you look at even companies like NVIDIA, that's only raised $20 million total. Microsoft, they were highly profitable from day one. They only took money because they thought they had to, but that $20 million just sat in the bank. So there's a lot of exceptions to the rule. For me, it was just about the network and who I wanted on the journey with me. And I felt setting up a board and board governance helps create the structure that I wanted to create a real company in.
Yeah. Well, so talking about TrendKite's journey a little bit, looking back after your exit, what's kind of one thing you realized or you thought you were doing right as a founder, but then kind of realized you had all wrong?
Everything? I don't know. Where do I want to start on that question? It's just a loaded question.
100%.
I think I'll be pretty prescriptive. The sales piece of it, I thought we were building a company the right way through sales only. And we could have made that company much more valuable if we had built through the ecosystem. So I just have much more of an ecosystem through distribution. Like think Microsoft as far as distribution. Like that was an area where we made a mistake, and I wish I could go back and redo that.
If you had one piece of advice you can give to an early stage founder like me, what would that be?
Man, every day is a new day, Paul. Enjoy the ride. You're going to learn something. As long as you leave the day and look back and say, well, today sucked, but at least I learned something, then you're doing something right.
Thank you, AJ. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Paul.
That was AJ Bruno, co-founder and CEO of QuotaPath. This episode was produced and edited by our executive producer, Katie D. Fiore. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It helps more people discover the show. We'd also love for you to share this episode with one person who might be inspired by AJ's story. Make sure to follow Dare to Disrupt on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.